And welcome to Stories of Amazing Grace. We're coming to you from Bixter Chapel at the Madison Church of Christ in Madison, Tennessee. Thank you for joining us online. Some of you are listening by way of radio, and of course for this live audience. Glad that you're here. And we'd love for you to be a part of the audience. We meet at 6:30 p.m. first Wednesday of the month, Bixter Chapel, Madison Church of Christ. Look forward to seeing you here sometime. Theme scripture comes from Romans 8:38 through 39. I am sure that nothing can separate us from God's love, not life or death, not angels or spirits, not the present or the future, and not powers above or powers below. Nothing in all creation can separate us from God's love for us in Christ Jesus our Lord. Well, our guest tonight is a good friend of mine, or at least a friend. Robert Buzzy Neal is here. He's a retired elementary teacher and principal of 32 years, having taught in Hawaii, Sumner County, Tennessee, and Metro Nashville. He was the first of 3 kindergarten teachers in public schools in Tennessee. He's a devoted first of 3 male kindergarten teachers. You're right, that's what it says here too. He's a devoted Christian, mission-minded, preaches once a month near Mount Eagle Mountain, and is a collector of old things and old ways. Buzzy says he was born 100 years too late. Or at least your father said that about you. Yeah. Buzzy will share stories about his life from his book, The Free-Range Life of Buzzy Neal, and will offer evidence that some things are not always as they seem. Buzzy says too often we jump to conclusions, we misjudge someone, we put ourselves in precarious positions, we make promises we cannot keep, we are misjudged by others, and we don't see God working. Our loving Heavenly Father dries our tears, clears our scrapes, and gives us more of amazing grace. So, 40 years has been a long time since we've known one another. When I was doing Souder and Friends 40 years ago on Channel 5 here in Nashville, people would often ask, Larry, where do you get the story ideas for Souder and Friends? Well, some of them came from this man here. Buzzy Neal was the source of many of those. So watch these Souder and Friends excerpts suggested by Buzzy, and then you'll meet Buzzy Neal.
Would you like to look around?
Yeah.
Pick you out something? This is all smaller stuff. It's hand tools and lots of household items. Of course, everybody knows what that even if it was an antique.
Looks like a potty to me.
It looks kind of like it.
Did you use that yourself or
no,
not?
that's even before me, I think. I call it my treasure. Now, my wife and boy call it junk, but I don't. I enjoy it myself and enjoy people coming up and looking it over and reminiscing about Grandpa used to have this. I wouldn't take $100,000 for it at all.
200,000?
You'd be getting close to my pocket.
400,000.
You bought it.
Okay.
Now these are the colored egg chickens here. That's the Araucana. And they lay different colors of eggs. This is the rarest I think that I have. This is the German Spitzhauben.
Now these chickens are exotic chickens. Do you ever eat these chickens?
Yes. A chicken is a chicken when you get it in the frying pan.
Any of these chickens ever lay a golden egg?
No.
You might call him the Pied Piper of pigs, but in reality, his name is Robert Pinkerton. He lives on this farm, by this creek, in that house. And at 81 years of age, he's still going strong.
I think you won.
You're pretty stout.
Want to have a race?
From here to that hog chute over there, huh?
Hog shooting back.
Shall I give you a head start?
I don't need any start. only your legs is long in mine. That's the only difference.
Well, I have boots on too, you know.
Yeah.
Well, let's have at it then.
On your mark. Get set. Go! Come on. Go. Yeah.
He let me beat him. I don't believe he wasn't hard to do anything.
You're pretty good.
I don't believe he's hard to do anything.
Hi there, Mr. Winter.
Good afternoon.
Got a good crop this year, have you?
Well, starting out pretty good. Hope it holds out.
Now, this your first year for hot dogs?
This is the first year for hot dogs.
Any problems in growing hot dogs?
Well, I guess dogs would probably be the largest problem that we have.
You're a big problem, huh?
Yeah.
Tell you what, you got any buns for these?
Sure, tree right across the road there, just loaded.
It was just a quiet spot where daily cares could be forgot, and it gave the same relief to rich and poor.
This is one of the best equipped outhouses I've seen. It's a two-holer, has a bag of lamb, roll of corn cobs, and a good view of the stream. One time a flood shifted it off of the foundation. We've got a cable, as you can see, around it to hold it in place, have it strapped to a tree, because we don't want it to wash away.
I've used it for years and years and years, and my family used it here to me, and I am the last member of the family, and I use it yet.
It wasn't fancy built at all, it had newspapers on the wall. It was air conditioned in the winter time. It was just a humble hut, but the doors were never shut, and a man could get inside without a dime. Don't let them tear that little brown building down. Don't let them tear that precious building down.
Please welcome Robert Buzzy Neal. Come on up. Thank you. Have a seat, sir.
Thank you.
Well, do you remember that story about the outhouses?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you suggested that. Now tell me how you found that outhouse and you had to do some repair on it.
Well, we had the log house on the creek there that you saw, but we didn't have an outhouse. And so I was still teaching. I was at Jolton at the time, and passing on the interstate, Briley Parkway, I saw this structure on the side of the road, and it was where they were building, where they're fixing to build the interchange of Briley Parkway, Dickerson Road, all that.
Right.
And I knew that would have to be moved, and so I stopped and asked the people if it would be available. And they said yes. It was actually a pump house. It had double tongue and groove walls, inside and outside tongue and groove walls with a weatherboarding over that. The problem is it's full of bees. And my dad, while I was at school, rented a truck and got a friend to go with him to get it. And the bulldozer driver on the project was going to tip it over onto this flatbed truck. Well, the friend that he got to go with him to help got stung, and that was the end of him. He got in the truck and stayed the rest of the time. But they tipped it over on this flatbed truck full of bees, drove it to Fernvale in Williamson County, and left it for whoever owned the truck didn't need it for a while. And so for like 3 or 4 weeks, we left it on the truck full of bees. Well, finally, I thought, well, this isn't going to work. And so I was able to tip the outhouse full of bees onto a foundation I'd built, not on the ground, but a wooden 2x6 or 2x8s with cedar posts, able to tip it onto that without getting stung. The way I made sure I didn't get stung, I wore a windbreaker with elastic around the sleeves and the elastic around my waist and around the face, tied it all tight, and then did something real smart. I sprayed my hands and face with Raid.
Good idea.
And I did not get stung.
That's good.
And I'm still alive.
And you unloaded the outhouse, but you had to do some type of repair.
Well, we finally, y'all skip how we got rid of the bees. We did get rid of the bees, but it was really had to kill the bees to get rid of them, which I hated to do and lose the honey. But anyway, at some point, a flood had filled the outhouse hole with rock and sand and all, and I thought, well, for my mother's and daddy's birthday, they had birthdays back to back, November 14 and 15. For their birthday, I think a good birthday present would be for me to get down in the outhouse hole and clean it out.
Of course.
Because it really hadn't been used that long, and it had all this rock and stuff in it, probably about that much rock and sand. And so I got down in the outhouse hole by crawling under the outhouse, and all my wooden box that I'd built for animals so that animals wouldn't fall in the outhouse hole, that had all gotten broken during this flood. So I got down in there and cleaned it all out one day. And I'd had to take personal leave from school to do that. And the only vehicles that would pass during the day would be the postman and the postman and the school bus. So I'm down in there cleaning out the outhouse hole, and I got it down to well, let's say to pay dirt. I just thought, well, I might as well just go to the bottom, so I did. Got it all cleaned out and nailed the box all back up so that animals wouldn't fall in it, and then looked up and realized I couldn't get through the outhouse hole. So here I am trapped in the outhouse. And the blessing of that was that I was able to reach with my hammer, which I had inside, I could reach the crowbar on the outside and drag it over and freed myself.
Mm-hmm.
But
otherwise, you would have been
well,
stuck.
I'd been waiting until my sister and brother-in-law, who are here tonight, heard screams from out in the woods. And they would have maybe, hopefully, figured out where the screams were coming from.
Wow. Before we get to the bunch of the stories in your book, I'm sure people want to know, where did the name Buzzy come from? How did that originate?
Well, my sister, who's here, was 4 years older than me, and when I was a baby, she named me Buzzy because she said I slobbered like a buzzard. Well, I had never seen a buzzard slobber. She must have at some point, or seen a cartoon of a buzzard drooling over a dead animal. But about 5 or 6 years ago, I was sitting on the porch of a cabin up in the woods and looking out over a big dead tree that had a buzzard sitting in the top of the tree. And he would sling his head around to scratch his back, and stuff would fly out of his mouth when he did that. So that's how I got the name. I slobbered like a buzzard.
And it stayed with you ever since.
Yeah.
Why did you write the book?
I didn't write the book.
Okay.
I wrote down all the funny things that had been said in school when I was teaching, and I taught kindergarten more than any other year, so I had some great lines from kindergarten. Just wrote stories. I started writing everything I could remember that was important or funny that I'd been told about before I was born. In fact, my sister said I can remember before I was born. But anyway, I wrote those stories, and then I wrote family stories and just funny stuff that happened to me, well, like the outhouse, and other stuff. And when I retired, I decided, well, I've got to write everything I can think of, get it typed, and onto paper, just pages, and staple them together for the children and grandchildren. And Bonnie Fusel, who's here tonight, said, Buzzy, this has got to be a book. And Bonnie, where are you? Okay, see the hand up over here. She said, Buzzy, this has got to be a book. She wrote for the Portland, Tennessee newspaper and knew a lot about writing and all that. And I said, Bonnie, I'm not writing a book. Yes, you are. This has got to be a book. And people that we camped with, some of them here, said it's got to be a book. And then a man who was the principal at Franklin Road Academy said, Buzzy, you've got to write a book. Fred, I'm not writing a book. Yeah, you are, and I'm naming it The Free-Range Life of Buzzy Neal. He named it 12 or 14 years ago, and it didn't come out till last November. So I refused and fought it, but Bonnie helped to make it a book. We talked to an elder in Huntsville, Alabama, Mike Dozier, no kin to Buck. I don't know unless Buck wants to claim him. And he helped put it all together with pictures.
Gotcha.
And so it ended up being a book in spite of my not wanting to write a book.
Alrighty. Well, we've got several stories to go through. I don't know if we'll get to half of these or not, but your first one is Mocking the Tenderfoot. Tell me about that.
I was in Boy Scouts, probably 14, maybe 15 years old, very proud of my tough leather on the bottoms of my feet. And we were camping in Gunnersville, Alabama, on the edge of the lake, and I saw a boy that was part of another group. I don't know if they were Boy Scouts or not, but he was walking on gravel and doing like this, and I laughed at him and made fun of him for being a tenderfoot. And when he got to the grass, he was still walking the same way. I'll never forget that. But it shows that things are not always the way they appear to be.
You have talked about some colorful Alabama characters, Stocklaw and Dora.
Yeah, this is Stocklaw and Dora. We had another picture of them standing on the side of a steep hill in a rutted out trail that went up to their house. He was a door-to-door salesman in Gunnersville, Alabama. And Stocklaw was the money side of the family. You can see her holding her purse there. Stocklaw would come to my grandparents' house on Main Street in Gunnersville, Alabama, which Main Street in Gunnersville actually is Highway 431, which we're all familiar with. But they would come there, and he would sell there and other places. He'd sell pine kindling and walnuts and hickory nuts and sassafras root and pictures of himself, songs that he had written.
Anything to make money, huh?
Yeah, and he even had a little record player he'd bring and play you a record for a nickel.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Stocklaw, at the time of the Depression, the reason he was called Stocklaw, the government of Alabama made a law that you had to put fences up to keep your animals in. And Stocklaw wouldn't do that. He refused to build fences. He didn't think that was right. And so one day some of his goats were eating grass on the poisoned right-of-way of the railroad and died. And he sued the railroad for killing his goats. And when it went to court, the judge said, Mr. Johnson, didn't you know there was signs everywhere that said poison grass, danger? He said, everybody knows goats can't read. Well, Stocklaw, so that you don't misjudge Stocklaw, he borrowed a quarter from everybody that he knew in Gunnersville, Alabama and surrounding area in order to start a goat business. And he paid every person back the quarter that he had borrowed. Every person. So he was quite a fella. His picture is on display in the lodge of the Gunnersville Lake State Park.
Really? All right. Well, prices for cars and trucks are high, but you found a bargain in a truck.
Yeah, a fellow is the assistant director of Camp Shiloh when I was the director. He and I decided to drive to Maine, to Bar Harbor, Maine, after camp one summer. And on the way, we went through a little community called Cozy Corners, Massachusetts. There's one store in Cozy Corners, and it was the post office, the antique store, and the grocery store. And there was an old pickup truck with the fenders on the side and the headlights on the fenders that had a sign on it that said, "Find me a home, $5." Well, I thought, man, that's quite a deal for a truck. So I went in the store and I said, "Does this truck run?" And proprietor said, "Oh yeah." I said, "The owner of it goes to town and gets 100 pounds of corn every week." And so anyway, I thought, well, I've got to have this truck. I didn't know how I'd get it back to Nashville, but I had to have this truck. So my friend Charlie and I went on to Bar Harbor, Maine. Coming back, we had to go 50 miles out of the way to go back by Cozy Corners, Massachusetts. So we stopped, and the truck's still there. And so I asked, "Is the owner of the truck here?" And they said, "Yeah, he's here." So I met the owner, and I said, "You know that truck, $5 seems kind of cheap for that truck." He started cussing. He said, "What do you mean $5? I said, "Well, there's a sign out there that says, 'Find me a home, $5. He said, "Oh, somebody tied an old dog to the truck and stuck that sign up there." So I'd gone 50 miles out of the way to get that $5 truck.
Would have been a bargain, though. Would have been a bargain. Well, back to Camp Shiloh, porcupine story at Camp Shiloh.
Well, a college professor from MTSU was at Camp Shiloh that summer, and we were working to get the camp ready for the children. And the camp had moved from New Jersey, where I worked, and up to upstate New York in the Catskill Mountains. And so a group from Brentwood Hills Church would go up there and help get the camp ready. And this professor from MTSU and some other people from Murfreesboro would go. And so he said, "There's a porcupine in a tree over here, and I'm going to go knock it out of the tree." And he had a 40-foot ladder, of course 20 feet that you could extend to 40 feet. And he had a 15-foot piece of PVC pipe, and he wanted me to hold the ladder. Well, I agreed to hold the ladder. And so he starts up this 40-foot ladder straight up and down with me holding the ladder at the bottom and with this PVC pipe 15 feet long. And he gets to the very top rung. The porcupine's still even further up. He's on the top rung of the ladder. And I thought, man, I'm responsible for his life or death. And so he's poking the porcupine with his PVC pipe. Never could knock it out of the tree. But finally, the porcupine starts down the tree. And here I am at the bottom holding the ladder. Well, he was trying to come down as fast as he could, and the porcupine's coming right behind him, and I'm still holding the ladder. And I thought, well, I sure hope that he gets to the bottom of the ladder before the porcupine. And thank the Lord, the porcupine jumped out about 15 feet up. And so I was safe, but I'll never hold the ladder for somebody that's wanting to knock a porcupine out of a tree.
You were director at Camp Shiloh for a while, weren't you?
Yeah. 3 years, worked there 6 years.
Do you know I went to Camp Shiloh also?
Oh, yeah. Where's the camper?
Yes.
Okay, that's back when we
61
had some children from the neighborhood, and it wasn't all hardcore inner city,
right.
but it ended up being all
right.
inner city children.
This is not on your list, but can you tell us about the Kaibo Spotlight?
Oh, well, we call the outhouse, there's an outhouse in the boys' area and the girls' area. Had running water, but had no electricity and no flushing toilets in the area where the campers were. And so in the boys' area, I guess in the girls' area too, the counselor would assign a camper to have the honor of walking to the outhouse with a camper that needed to go to the bathroom during the night. Of course, that was supposed to be a great honor, and the counselor was so glad they didn't have to do it. So one night, some child was walking another to the outhouse in the boys' area, and little boy lost his flashlight in the outhouse hole with the flashlight turned on, shining straight up. The interesting thing about that situation, nobody would use that hole of the outhouse until the light went out.
Well, you traveled around the world, and one of those places was Okinawa. There's a kind of a touching story about Okinawa.
Yeah, the purpose of the camp, it was 80 miles north of Naha, up in the mountains, and it took 4 hours to go 80 miles. So you can imagine what kind of road it was. But we had just gotten there and gotten our tents put up, and there was a prediction of a typhoon coming, which did come and blew almost everybody's tent down, blew the dining tent down, and all this. And then I ended up going out looking for floats from the fish nets. The Japanese would take glass and melt it and make glass balls to float their fish nets. And so these glass balls had floated from Japan, other parts of Japan down to this side of Okinawa. And I was just dying to take some of those glass floats home with me. And so the last day before we were going to leave the next day, I went out to pick up some of the glass floats. I had an amber one, which was the only amber one I found, and a bunch of green ones, and got them in my shirt, and I'm wanting to go back the way I came, but the tide had come in, and I was going to get soaking wet. So I decided to try to climb the bluff and thought it was solid rock. I got up about 30 feet and realized it wasn't rock, it was dirt. And to get up to the next level, I was going to have to push off with my feet to get up. And while I was trying to figure out how I was going to do that, knowing I couldn't push off, I fell about 30 feet, had enough sense of mind to turn over and bounce down this bluff on my back, which just shredded my back and my shirt, and lost all my glass floats, but didn't break any of them on my stomach.
Could have been bad.
But anyway, the real sad thing about the camp, the purpose of the camp was to teach Japanese students from Tokyo about the Bible. They were Buddhist students from Tokyo that wanted to come to the camp and learn about the Bible, or wanted to learn English rather. And of course, we wanted to tell them about God and the Bible. So we had been working on that, studying with them and trying to teach them about God and about Jesus. And one of the girls from Tokyo was not Buddhist. Her family was Christian. They were Catholics. But, and I'd never felt close to a Catholic family before. But when they came to visit the camp and see where she had drowned in the ocean while she was at the camp, and me and another person in the camp tried to resuscitate her. We worked for hours trying to resuscitate her, couldn't. And her parents wanted to come and see where she had died. And so here these Catholic mother and father and sister come, and they were not mourning like the Buddhists would have been, because they believed in eternal life. And they believed that there was a heaven that they could go to. See, with karma, with a Buddhist, with karma, you die into a state of nothingness and eventually come back either better or worse than you were before, depending on how you lived. There's no grace, no forgiveness, no Savior. As a Buddhist, you reap what you sow. And we were so thankful that these people came and we were able to tell the other students who were Buddhists, this is what we're trying to teach you about. Heaven, Jesus, God. And it just, I'll never forget that experience.
Let's go to Hawaii
Okay.
and a goat.
Well, okay.
Sharon said, do not bring home a goat.
Yeah, well, Sharon and I when we got married, I had the idea of trying to do some interesting things before we had children. And she had not learned to say no yet. So I talked her into living in the inner city in Nashville for a year and teaching school in the inner city, which I did, and she was finishing her degree at Lipscomb. And we were living in the inner city during the racial unrest of 1969 when Malcolm X came to Nashville and all that. We would have to, after church on Sunday night or Wednesday night, sometimes to get to our house, we would have to change our route going home because of the mobs in the street. Well, then I talked her into going to Hawaii for a year to get that cultural experience after a year in the inner city. And it's unbelievable what God did. I interviewed for a job in Cincinnati to teach in Hawaii. I think Sharon and I both interviewed. And so I got a job teaching kindergarten on Oahu in a neighborhood that I already knew was bad, possibly one of the worst neighborhoods in the state, because I'd been around the world in '67 when we went to Okinawa. And so I knew I didn't want to go to Waimanalo if I could get out of it. And we had, in the meantime, rented a house in Hilo, Hawaii, on the Big Island. And we wanted to work for the little church in Hilo. And got a good deal on a house with 2 acres and all kind of fruit trees and nut trees and all that. And so we moved to Hilo with my job on Oahu, 400 miles away. Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, it'd be like Nashville. There's hundreds, thousands of jobs. So I would go to the district office on the Big Island every day, asking for a teaching job on the Big Island. And the district superintendent would tell me every day there are no jobs on the island. And so I was beginning to think, Now we didn't have enough faith to send our car to Hilo. The car's in Oahu. So my faith wasn't what it should have been. But anyway, the day before I was supposed to start in service, 400 miles away, we're on the Big Island with no money and no way to get to Oahu and no plan of what to do if I got to Oahu except to take that job. So I go to the district office to see the superintendent who told me day after day after day there are no jobs on the island. So I asked him again that day, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He said, do you think you could teach home ec? No, he didn't. He said, do you think you could teach middle school or intermediate, they call it intermediate school, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. Do you think you could teach intermediate school reading? And I said, yes, sir, I can teach it. So God parted the Red Sea. I got a full-time job 4 miles from our home when it could have been 120 miles away, one way. Got a full-time job teaching intermediate school reading. Sharon got a substitute teaching job teaching boys PE. And the 2 boys PE teachers took care of Sharon like she was their sister. If the boys misbehaved, get on the floor. Give me 10 push-ups. And they'd do 2 or 3, and the guy'd say, 1. And they'd say, well, I've done 3. I'm the one counting. So they took care of Sharon. And then a high school boy who had been a student at Lipscomb, who went with us for the experience, graduated from Hilo High School. We drove 1 car to 1 location. He walked across the street to the high school, And Sharon and I walked into Hilo Intermediate to our jobs, and in 1 month, Sharon had a full-time job teaching English and Hawaiian history. God parted the Red Sea for us. Well, anyway, while we were there, we were good friends with a man that ran the boys' club, and he loved to hunt. So Vic McKee and I went with him hunting goats one time. Now, over there, you could be deputized as a national park ranger to hunt goats. The only thing is you had to carry out every goat you killed. You couldn't leave them there. And so to get to where I was going to hunt, I climbed over boulders as big as a car and get up to that spot and got ready and watching the brush, the underbrush. All of a sudden this goat comes out. Well, I shoot it and with a shotgun, and all excited about catching this goat or getting this goat. And Sharon had told me before I left, whatever you do, don't bring home a live goat. And I promised her I would not bring home a live goat. And then this baby goat comes out of the underbrush crying for mama. And I thought, oh man, I've got to take this goat home. So I clean or gut the adult goat. So I'm carrying over these huge lava boulders, the mama goat, the baby goat, a shotgun, and a bunch of shells. And I didn't think I'd ever get back to the road. That's probably the tiredest I've ever been in my life. Well, I get home with the baby goat, and Sharon loved it. So we had that baby goat until we left, and then wheeled it to an elderly couple that lived in one of the new subdivisions. But the funny thing about it, it wouldn't take the bottle. I had to force feed it, but fed it with a bottle. And Sharon said in the morning, Vic would get up and the goat wouldn't make a sound. She would get up and the goat wouldn't make a sound. But as soon as that goat heard my feet hit the floor, it'd start crying. So I was the goat's mama, fed that goat the whole time until we wheeled it to the other couple. But anyway, Sharon grew to love the goat. The really crazy thing that happened was we'd let it in the house at night, and it would, run around the room, and we had a couch, and the goat would climb up on the couch and climb up on the back of the couch and run across the back of the couch. And I was grading papers one night, and the goat started eating the children's homework. Now, you've heard of children having an excuse about why they didn't do their homework. I had to go to school and tell the students why I didn't grade their papers, because the goat ate them. That's a true story. Every story in the book is totally true. I didn't have to make up anything. It's all true, every word.
Including the license decal.
Oh, yeah. Well, Sharon and I went back to Hawaii twice. We taught one school year, 71 school year in Hilo. Then we've been back twice to preach for, one time was on the Big Island at the Waimea Church, which was up in the mountains north of Hilo, and near the Parker Ranch, which is the second largest cattle ranch in the United States, on the island of Hawaii. But anyway, we preached there for a month, and one of the two King Kamehameha statues in Hawaii is in the little community where we stayed and close to where the church was. Well, anyway, I thought I love farming and had a farm license on my truck, and I thought, well, I've got to get some kind of decal while I'm here that's about farming, that says something about Hawaii. So I finally, after hunting for days and days and days, I found the perfect decal. Now, this was the second time we went over to preach, which was in 2008. We did it in 06 and 08, and that time we went to Maui. and the church was on the opposite side of the island from where the fires were. But anyway, I finally found the perfect decal that said, "Farm it, Maui grown." And I thought, that's perfect, farming in Maui. And so I hired this homeless guy to help me cut wood for Martin's Barbecue, which I did for 9 years. And this homeless guy helped me off and on that whole 9 years. And he, after 5 years of helping me, finally one day he looked at that and said, "Wowie Maui, wowie Maui." I said, "What?" He said, "The best marijuana in the United States is grown in Maui." I couldn't get home quick enough to scrape that Maui grown off of my decal. It still said "farm it," but it didn't say Maui grown anymore.
Tell us about Elvira, mistress of the night.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you that the culprit that caused me to look like a fool that day is in the audience. There was a cardboard cutout of Elvira at Kroger, life size, Elvira. And I'm walking by Elvira, and all of a sudden she says, "Hello." And I thought, that's interesting. And then I hear again, "Hello." I heard "hello" 3 times. In the meantime, I'm looking around to figure out where the I is that, you know, would cause the voice, or looking for a microphone, and can't find a microphone, can't find the I. And finally I realized "hello" is in my pocket. Sharon had gotten me a cell phone. I'd never had a cell phone. Wouldn't have gotten one up for myself, but she wanted to know where I was, be able to keep up with me. So she'd got me a cell phone. I'd never gotten a call on it. Don't know how I got a call on it then. But somewhere I got a call on that phone, and Elaine Rice, who's sitting down here next to my wife, Sharon, was calling me on that phone, and I thought it was Elvira talking to me.
Maybe she'll call tonight. I don't know. Tell me what happened at McDonald's.
Well, my dad said I could make a living on a bare rock, and I've never thrown away clothes until nobody would wear them. So anyway, I would patch clothes. In fact, I was darning a sock last night, and I'm not cussing, saying I was darning a sock. Does anybody here know what darning a sock is? Hold your hand up if you know what that means. Okay, we've got a few old timers here. It means I was sewing a hole up in a sock. And so I was darning a sock last night, but I had clothes that I had patched, and I had the most beautiful patches and the most beautiful stitches on those patches. And then I had holes I hadn't even gotten to yet. But I was at McDonald's in Melrose one day, and I went in. It was real hot, about 95 degrees, and I ordered a double cheeseburger. And the lady gave me a cup and said, "Go fill it up." I said, "Well, I didn't pay for that." She said, "That's okay, go fill it up." Well, so I went and filled the cup up, brought it back, and she poured it into the biggest cup they had and said, "Now go fill it up." I said, "Well, it is real hot out there today." And then when I got my cheeseburger, she put fries in the bag, French fries. And I thanked her and left and got out and sat down in the truck, and I looked down at how ragged I was and how dirty I was. And I said, she thought I was homeless. Well, some friends, well-intending friends, said, "Well, why didn't you go in and pay for the rest of that food?" I said, "Well, that would have ruined her good deed." She was trying to do a good deed for a homeless man.
Sure. Hard-working teachers. You have a story about hard-working teachers.
Well, I called it brushes with the law, but Melba Boyd who was the family school coordinator at Schwab School, and a first grade teacher named Evelina Crawford. They were out making home visits one day. And there was a lady that they needed to see who worked the streets. You all know what that means? Well, she worked the streets. That was her job. And she was not at home, but on the way back to school, they saw her on the street corner. And they thought, well, we know what she's doing, but we've got to talk to her. We've got to get these papers signed. So they go over to her, park the car and get out of the car and go over to her and start talking to her about signing these papers. And all of a sudden, the blue lights show up. And so the police turns the blue lights on, and he gets out of the car and said, "You women are going to have to move on." And they said, "But we're school teachers." He said, "I knew they weren't paying y'all enough money." And the other time was I was on the way to school, and I didn't know that people that are on drugs have a real wild-eyed look on their face. And this woman was at the intersection of Ellington Parkway and Spring Street, just looking like this. And I thought, she's in fear of her life. So I stopped and offered her a ride, and she gets in the truck, and I said, well, she said, "Do you want a date?" I said, "No, I've got a full-time date. I'm married." I said, "Where do you want to get out?" She said, "Right here would be fine." And we'd gone about a half a block. So I guess she was not in fear for her life. But I did learn about that. You know, in fact, my son was with me one day, and we were driving down Dickerson Road, and there's a woman coming straight at us in the traffic with that wild-eyed look, and I understood that that's what drugs will do to these people. Mm-hmm. But anyway, sad situation. We were fighting ignorance and prostitution at the same time at Schwab School when we were teaching there, and have some Schwab teachers here who could tell some more similar stories.
Tell me about fire water.
Well, my dad preached for 6 years at South Harpeth, where we're now going, from 1948 to 1954. And there was a member of the church named Cliff Linton who would bring my dad 2 gallons of sulfur water on Sunday. And Daddy'd bring the jugs back the next Sunday for 2 more full jugs of sulfur water. And my dad actually cured himself of bad ulcers drinking sulfur water from a spring near Caney Fork Road in Fernvale. Well, he would put those empty jugs in the back of his car, and one Sunday, the sun shining through that car window caused the light to be refracted, and it caught the seat on fire. So the people at South Harpeth Church started accusing my father of drinking fire water because of the back seat catching on fire. But Cliff Linton had a first cousin that lived on Old Harding Pike, just a very short distance from where Governor Lee lives now. In fact, Governor Lee worshiped with us the 21st of May, which was the 211th anniversary of the South Harpeth Church. What a blessing to have him there that day. But anyway, Cliff stopped to speak to Emery Linton, his cousin. And Emery, who was known for making moonshine, looked in the seat in the back of the car and said, "Cliff, what are you doing with them jugs?" He said, "Well, I take sulfur water to my preacher because he uses it, drinks it for his stomach." And Emery said, "You give me them jugs, and I'll give him something that'll really make him preach."
We're about to run out of time. Let's, if okay with you, let's skip down to the haunted house.
Okay. Sharon and I, when we moved to Portland, Tennessee, because I didn't get a job immediately when we came back from Hawaii in Nashville. and a friend from Centerville was a teacher in Sumner County, and helped us get jobs in Sumner County. And so we decided to move to Portland, and even though the job was in Westmoreland, because we got a good deal on a house to rent. It was an old house. Now this doesn't look like it did then. That side over there is more like it was, but it wasn't painted, and it looked kind of haunted. But anyway, we moved into that house with 11-foot ceilings. And one night, and of course, you know, being in a new place and not knowing anybody, you're kind of uneasy about things. And so one night, Sharon and I are in the bed right by the front porch window, and Sharon wakes me up and said, Buzzy, there's somebody outside. Well, I listened and listened. I couldn't hear him. But Sharon said, he's walking around outside. I listened, and she finally convinced me there was somebody out there. So I get up out of bed, and I'm going around peeping out the windows, looking for whoever's out there, and I go look through every window till I get to the back porch where our boxes are still full from when we moved to that old house. And by the way, the person that we rented from was Bob Cummings, who was the football coach at Hendersonville, and that was his parents' house. Well, anyway, I got to the back porch where all our boxes are still packed, and all of a sudden, he was on the back porch and kicked a box, and it just scared. I came running back to the front and said, he's on the back porch. And Sharon runs out the front door screaming, and I run out the front door following her, and we're in the middle of Rapids Road in Portland, Tennessee, across from Gilbert and Sarah Young's house, and they're not at home. And it's like 3 o'clock in the morning. And so we'd call 911, and Barney came. And Barney went in the house. He went upstairs. Nobody, and we'd been told, don't go upstairs. You're not allowed to go upstairs. So we were sure he's probably up there. So Barney goes upstairs, no intruder. No, the back door is not even open. And so Barney finally leaves and said, well, if you have any more trouble, call me. So we sit down on the floor, because we didn't have any furniture yet, in the living room. And all of a sudden, I look, and the front door is shaking, and I hear that noise again. And I said, he's outside at the front door. And so Sharon and we both call 911 again. Barney comes back and doesn't find anybody. So finally Sharon says, I'm going to go get in the car, and I'm staying till daylight. So she goes out and locks herself in the Volkswagen Squareback, and I say, well, I'm going to sit in the house and try to figure out what's going on. So I finally calmed down and heard the noise again. We'd gotten a new refrigerator. Well, it was new to us, used, but it had an automatic ice maker. We'd gotten that the day before, and we'd plugged it in and gotten the water hooked up, and during the night it started making ice. And that's what those noises were. But the bad thing that I am so glad for that experience, because it taught me a great lesson. Revelation 21 verse 8 has those that will have their part in the lake that burns with fire and brimstone. It begins with the fearful, or some versions say the cowardly, and ends with all liars. Well, Sharon and I lived with and in fear for at least 2 weeks, knowing it was the ice maker. We had the Red Sea parted in Hawaii. And we're in Portland a year later, fearful, filled with fear. And that taught me you cannot be filled with fear and filled with faith at the same time. You can't. So that taught us a great lesson.
And that's just a few of the stories in this book. Thank you, Buzzy, for being with us. Thank you. I want to close by reading a short paragraph from your book. You comment on the love of God. You say this: "Then there is John 3:16, the greatest evidence of all. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life." The word whosoever can be singular as well as plural. I am convinced that Jesus would have been willing to die for me, period. There was no quota to be reached. I am that valuable to him. You are that valuable to him as well. The book is called The Free Range Life of Buzzy Neal. You can pick a copy in the lobby today, only $12. And thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for joining us on Stories of Amazing Grace, and we'll see you next time on Stories of Amazing Grace. Thanks for coming by.